Hey everyone, this review is being brought to you under a set of very special, unusual, and yet not unprecedented circumstances. This is Victory Lap Raceway from 1988, and it was selected for me to review by a Patreon supporter who simply goes by the name Tim. However, Tim, in turn, was gifted that right to pick a set for me to track down, build, and share with all of you by another Patreon supporter who goes by GK Econ. Now, if you've heard me say GK Econ before, maybe you've seen him in comments. Maybe you've seen when his minifig was added to my Lego city. So kind of a little bit of spreading the Lego love around there, a little bit of paying it forward. Big thanks to Tim and GK Econ, and now I get to share this with all of you. The set was from the LEGOLAND Super theme, and you could call it a part of Classic Town. And those were the days when LEGO did base plates with sets. This is a 2 base plate set, giving it dimensions of 32 by 64. It also came with 13 minifigures. There are 4 open wheel race cars here, which have identical builds between them, just different colors and different prints for the slopes on the front. And I will give you a closer look at those, spend a little bit of extra time with them. But first I want to focus on the main build, you know, the thing that has those 2 base plates. The base plates themselves are identical. So this one here is the same as the one up there. You get some starting grid positions. This is a pit lane over here. So just a little bit, not modern at all, not safe at all, but, you know, a little old school, a little classic in its style where people just pull off kind of to the side of the road. You got a start finish line there, and then you have an alternate start finish line up here because, again, the same base plate is used front and back, and that worked out just fine. You know, obviously there were turns that would work with this pretty well. You use just the regular, they go town turns, and the pits are built basically identical to each other. So just go ahead and take a quick look at the pits. So each one has a little cart, which would be able to carry tires. So they have an extra yellow wheel with a tire on it. That one had a little bit of glue in it, looks like. Old stuff, well played with. This one has just a white one, so just a couple colors there, but they don't have separate pit equipment for each of the 4 cars. They only have pit equipment for 2 cars because ultimately they wanted to use all of this as just one pit. So all of this space on one base plate would be one single pit. So fuel canister there, looks like it's got the shell colors, and then, you know, the filler, and attached actually to the base plate via its studs. You got the jack to lift a car up, that is nice, as well as a rack for some tools and a fire extinguisher back there as well. Now each of these pits does have a marker above it, so not just using the old school flag system, but, you know, nice little thing there with the lights even, you know, stop, go, 3, and there's the 4th one. So it's kind of a hybrid. They're suggesting that there are 2 pits per section, but then they only have equipment for 1 each. You could do it however you want it. I personally recommend that you just use each section for 1 car because each car is kind of long, and if you try to do both, well, that's a tight squeeze. Anyway, semantic little stuff, doesn't matter that much. Upstairs, this is race control. We'll take a look at that from the other side a little bit better. We got a couple of printed bricks right there, printed 1x1s. They each said 3. I believe that's for the lap number, but I could be mistaken on that. This looks like stands over here, grandstands, but, you know, a little bit of covering. But there weren't really seats. I guess you could sit figures there. Let me just grab one real quick. Try to make it work, you know, just using those rear studs. Like, that does technically work, right? But it's make it work. Again, you know, I personally always prefer to have a full set of 4 studs for each minifigure's bottom to be attached to, or the back of their legs. Now over here, so you see, obviously there are a lot of prints in this set, and this is where most of the prints kind of aggregate together. Different printed pieces, including the same part used right there, the clock piece upside down, kind of suggesting lap times, maybe. You really had to use your imagination for exactly what these things meant. This is an interesting mobile sign, transforming sign, because you rotate this and now it's showing that you've got a turn. Maybe it's kind of suggesting that there's a turn coming up versus a straightaway that just continues. Or is this indicating, hey, you need to pit based on which car number you are? Could be one of those sorts of things. I don't recall there ever being something like this, like a centralized call out station for all the cars to use. It's typically done on a pit by pit basis by somebody holding a board. Nowadays it's all just done by radio, but they still have the boards as well as backups. But yeah, there are a lot of things you could use here. Also, obviously, race control is handled here with the start, with the red and green lights, and yeah, just a bunch of stuff, a bunch of printed pieces presented in a nice way. They gave it a lot of detail. Got this overpass over here, so that would allow fans to be standing all along here and watching right up against. I'll get another just kind of regular dude, kind of regular person, just for the sake of scale. They just look over the edge of the banister like that. And from this side over here, kind of reminds me of, well, a lot of stair things that LEGO did back in the day. Most closely reminds me of the airport shuttle and its stairway up to the platform. We'll take a better look at some of the stuff down below as well. Got a railing here, make sure nobody goes past that. This was a cool thing. More detailed than it needs to be sure. It's the TV cart, TV stand, TV platform. It slides back and forth. These are old pieces, as you can see. Some of them are a little bit chewed up. Some of them have some nicks, some dents, some stains. I was able to restore most of the white pieces using the regular hydrogen peroxide treatment, but didn't go too far with it. And again, it's an older set. Obviously was well played with, hopefully by lots and lots of kids before I got to it. It's kind of a nicer thing to see in general, I'd say. An old set that's well used as opposed to an old set that's completely mint. Like, it's nice to see mint, but especially once you start looking at the minifigures that I got up close, you can really see that this was played with. It was really enjoyed quite a lot. So that's a print right there, showing that it's kind of suggesting that it's film. But I'm assuming that this would be done more for TV than for just static film. Another print over there. You can angle this up and down. You can rotate it all around, and you can slide it side to side. The rest of this base plate area out here, studded. Just got the minifigs all lined up right now, but nothing else is actually built there, including all the way back around here. Now, let's take a closer look down lower so you can see a little bit more how this is all elevated. Right, so these pieces were used extensively. Same parts were used a decade later for one of my first sets to bring me back into being an adult fan of LEGO, taking me out of my my dark ages with one of the divers theme sets. But yeah, it basically gives you a half of a hexagonal opening, or you could put two of them together this way to create an interesting shape for a support. And they use that same thing across the way over here. Again, a pair of them. See a little bit of the backs of these tool racks, which also had an extra spare wheel around the side. So again, just an extra beaten up, chewed up old wheel, well played with. Again, more of those supports. Got a little area here just for the celebration. So you might do the victory celebration back here, victory ceremony, or that could be done up above. But just a little extra detail, and the rest of it is pretty much the same across all the way there. And these things, hopefully you saw from the front, these just have additional prints as well to represent some barriers. Up above, meanwhile, here is race control. And there's a single race director, I'm assuming, that would sit in that chair. He's got access to his telephone there. And hey, it's a very modern telephone. It has push buttons as opposed to a rotary dial. So this was state of the art. This was cutting edge stuff. And then that's a pretty nice little print right there as well with the computer readout, I'm assuming. This was not designed to be easily removed. I mean, you see little gaps there. It's just because, again, they're very old and well-worn pieces, but it's not like they have a tile top here and this whole thing was designed to be easily pulled off. Back in those days, they didn't do that stuff the way they do nowadays with tiles and modified tiles to minimize the points of contact, the points of secure contact between a roof and what holds it up to make it easy to pull it off. You would just have to do the full disassembly yourself if you wanted to get in there. But I mean, obviously it's very open, so it's not that difficult to especially get one single figure in there. And just up at the top, just a better angle on that. I don't know why these pieces didn't. I was trying to get those to go together a little bit better, just a little bit warping in there. Just all that gap. It bothers me. PA, right? You got your announcement system there. I can just imagine the echo from that system. And that's pretty much it for the structure of this. It's a fairly large thing, fairly open. Doesn't have a lot of detail, but plenty of space to run the cars down the road and then, you know, kind of expand that out, either using your imagination or other base plates from town sets and such. And then you had the pits as well. Really would have been nicer to have equipment for all 4 cars for their pits. These signs here are attached with 1 stud apiece. They do tend to come loose a little bit too easily, but you can see again the printed numbers all the way across. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the build. Let's look at some of the smaller things like the cars. Yeah, so I put minifigs in a couple of them for the sake of context, so you see how they are scaled as well as how they look in use, and left the figures out of a couple of them because the builds are all the same, and this gives you an idea, a little bit cleaner idea of how they're put together. Pretty simple. Each one has a specialized chassis piece. It just happens to be one of the smallest chassis they ever made. It was used for a lot of little town things as well, but you know, a basic piece that works pretty well, has the axles built into it, and then they just attach things around the sides pretty much. Most of the detail added to this is around the back. Like, they have a couple of things that almost look like they're trying to be exhaust headers. You know, it's kind of good use of that 1x2, the black 1x2 modified piece with the bars sticking out. Otherwise, yeah, the print on the front was special to get, you know, especially in a set like this where you get all 4 numbers. Very fancy. Some tiles were used to smooth things out a bit. The rear wings had the tile in the center, and then the 1x2 brackets, or 1x2 panels, technically they're called. Yeah, and they just changed up the color schemes, and that's just it. This one's like a McDonald's color scheme, looks like to me. I can't not see McDonald's in that, especially the older stuff that was a little bit more contrasty, a little bit brighter. And then this one has, I think, yeah, it's tied for most colors with the shell looking one. This is like a shell color scheme without actually putting the shell logo on it. They had plenty of those all around the racetrack. And yeah, that's just that. Pretty simple builds, but they worked, you know. And then this was kind of well, it could be used as a transporter truck, or it could be used as a recovery vehicle, right? An on-track recovery vehicle. Obviously, it has the shell scheme and even the prints there. So it could be sponsored by the track, or it could be one that went with, for example, this car. And then you would transport this car. Which way does it go? Yeah, it works a little bit better that way with the trailer that's practically one piece except for the tires on it, and even those came pre-assembled because they have the metal axle there, so the wheels themselves are just pressed on. And yeah, there's no assembly whatsoever for the trailer. Very interesting. You know, a lot of folks nowadays always think back to the old days of Lego of being just, you know, bricks, just pure plain bricks, but we see specialized chassis pieces. And oh, this is a fancy piece for the back of the window there. Yeah, it was used a bunch of times, but it's just because they didn't have a whole lot of variety and in their builds because they couldn't. They were limited on the number of pieces available. They had to make some special ones in order to make some of the iconic vehicles of the 4-stud wide era possible. that leaves enough room for the head to lean back and also to have hair. You know, if you didn't have that the indent made possible by this specialized rear window sort of piece or B-pillar piece, then a figure would always have to be leaning forward. So we do have a steering wheel down there. These doors, of course, are the ones that would open up. You can also open just the sunroof for this one, or moon roof for that. Now check this out. This is good. Oops, it's not supposed to fall out. Again, old pieces. So you got storage over there for fire extinguisher. Another reason that I think that this makes for a really good recovery truck, more so even than a car transporter. Over on this side, open that up. Spare tire. Now, there are actually 2 spare tires in there. That leans a little bit more towards the team transport idea. And then back here, this would work either way. You got a big old winch. And this is old, thick cord. It's some pretty thick string. I struggle to call it string. It's some pretty tough stuff, but I remember that from back in the day. Enjoyed that. Enjoyed the feel of it. Just felt like fun. Felt like strength and realism in those days. Yeah, I could pull a lot. Like you could pull something up a hill. You could pull a semi truck, which was the same width again as one of these little cars, 4 studs wide. You know, kids, you know, using imagination, thinking a little bit too far into things. This actually did have its own proper build for the base, although again, specialized piece for the fenders, that's fine. But then another specialized piece back here, the longer one, right? They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to have this piece, but it was used for some other smaller builds to make some things work, especially again for semi-trucks. This one worked out well for that, for cab over designs and such. But yeah, you know, realistically, this is pretty simple, but it's pretty good for its size especially. All right, we are going to look at all of the minifigs. 1988 was, if I recall correctly, the last year of the plain, normal, truly classic space minifigures. You know, the plain colored astronauts with the old style helmets. And here we are with a 1988 set with the newer style helmets. It was already active, the ones that could accept visors nicely with the updated design. A little bit of overlap there. Interesting to see. Simple prints for these guys, right? It's interesting that they did something completely different for the one in the white suit. I guess they wanted to stick with just the white print for the 2 zippers, and yeah, instead of changing out the ink, they just changed to a completely different design. And yeah, that dude in white is really showing his age. I did try to clean that up, but a lot of that is really stained and kind of embedded into the plastic at this point. I could probably do a little bit more, but this is kind of a first level of cleaning it up. Again, this set was well played with, well loved for many years, clearly. And here we have a situation where maybe one of these is an original from this set and one of them is a substitution. You can tell that the guy on the left has his face printed a little bit higher, actually, than the one on the right. The one on the right looks newer, but I don't know if it actually is. To be honest, it could just be not as played with as the one on the left. It'd be interesting to look in, but I personally have not followed the entire history of all the tiny, tiny differences that occurred over the years to even the basic Smiley minifigs. I tend to think of these two, by the way, as track workers, since they have the same printings. And the prints on the torsos are offset a little bit as well. This one's a little bit higher, and that's completely unrelated to the face because they're done at different times on different machines. These could be pit workers or track workers or just fans. I mean, they could be pretty much anything, right? Kind of generic in their appearance. Kind of a iconic color scheme for the guy on the left there. As always, no prints around the back to be seen, but that's those. Another couple generally generic dudes. Assign them whatever roles you want. I would assume that the one on the right is more of a fan, or more likely to be a fan, but I could be wrong. A little bit of offset with the red printing on his torso. And notice that the one on the left is, again, from a slightly different age with the thinner printing, just ever so slightly thinner printing. There were a bunch of different designs of basic smiley faces that LEGO did through the years, even in the old days. A bunch of different ones that are properly old and original for their time, but it depends on the exact year, and I believe also the source, the region and or factory that they were printed, they were produced. Here on the left, the only, I believe, overtly female figure that they were trying to include here, although, any of the ones that have hats could be whatever you want them to be, or with helmets. And then on the right, I think that would be like the race director. That would be the guy who waves the checkered flag, the guy who presents the trophy at the end, and I just realized this set does not include a trophy for the winner. It really should have. It's a little bit of a miss. I didn't think I would come up with anything negative for this set, but there you go. One miss, one thing wrong with this set. No trophy for that guy to present to the winner of the race. And finally, the track doctor, medical personnel here. This is a little bit sad in a couple ways. First of all, there's a smudge on the front of that torso that kind of looks like it could be a blood stain. I'm just saying, also an extra speck there. I don't know how that happened. It's definitely a mistake. But, just the idea of having medical personnel in a 1980s race car related toy. I mean, in those days, things were not as safe as they are nowadays. And nowadays, a lot of crashes happen. Most crashes happen, and the driver just gets out and walks away on his own. Back in those days, not so much. And that is why they also included with this set a stretcher. There's a little pillow at one end, and these were the nice old ones that had the fold-up wheels, a proper gurney with fold-up wheels. There were no rotating parts there. It just acted as a hinge, so you'd have something to fold up. But yeah, I had one of these for this one guy. And finally, I don't have the original box for this set, but I do have the original instruction manual, which includes on it some of the alternate box art that you would see on an inside flap or around the back and or around the sides. So these are some potential alternate builds that you could do with just the pieces included in this set. Look at that, an entire oil derrick. Doesn't even use one of the base plates because it's supposed to be out in the water. And that's pretty creative, a very creative use of the parts. They even have the crane over on the side with a people mover platform to lift folks up. Should have built a boat for this as well. I think they could have with the spare pieces. And this is even a helipad off to the side. You can just barely see it. Here, an airport totally makes sense. Those planes are rather small. Maybe they're intended to be large-scale RCs, but I see two characters here that are all suited up and ready to get in, and they got their helmets. So I'm assuming that they would run up to the planes, and then you just take the figures away and imagine that they're inside of there. Nice control tower in the back. Got some more here. So this is just an alternate build for the raceway. Maybe consider those to be like go-karts. Nice alternate build for the truck there. Is that the exact same thing? Looks like it's the exact same thing that's used here. Just showing a little bit more detail of that one. I like that little low slung transporter. This is the people mover elevator platform from the derrick, the oil derrick, and this is a close-up look at one of the go-karts, how those would be built, or, again, whatever you want it to be. And you can see one of them over here as well. Always nice to see suggestions for alternate builds to let kids know that it's okay. It's even encouraged to do things different from just the default for which the instructions are provided. So that's Victory Lap Raceway from 1988. I want to conclude this with a little bit of reporting on a thought experiment that I did in relation to this, thinking back to myself as a car fan, a race fan, a toy fan, in maybe not the late 80s, but let's say like early to mid 80s. Yeah, early to mid 80s. I want to take you through my thought process from back in those days, looking at something. I didn't actually do this, but I remember clearly how I thought in those times, thinking of, let's say, a purchase decision or a request to parents to purchase decision between a set like this and an alternate use of the same money, non-Lego related. So what I thought of was this versus a slot car set. I like slot cars. I actually got slot cars for a time in my childhood. I got really lucky, actually. Won a set from a Salvation Army. It was $25. We won a $25 gift certificate. Very, very lucky with that. But so if I had to choose between asking for this and a slot car set, here are the things that I would have thought. Slot car set obviously actually goes, right? The cars actually move. So there's some excitement about that can't be replicated with a static set like this. However, counterpoint, I can always make these things go on my own, right? I can just move them with my hands and choose, which one's going to be faster and do little scenarios of passes and stuff like that. Slot car set would come with 2 cars. This comes with 4 cars. Advantage here. This also comes with all the pit equipment. That's more stuff that I could do. Also comes with this whole truck. And if I wanted to turn that into a race car, I kind of could, take some stuff off, customize it a little bit. It already has a wing, so that means it's fast. More points to this one, but still, the slot cars actually go. There are more cars here, and if I wanted to customize, and I did still already back then like customizing things and doing things on my own. If I wanted to customize a slot car, well, I can use a Sharpie, change the colors, change some of the designs. But if I really wanted a car to be something different, if I wanted to switch from an AMC, an AMX Javelin over to, I don't know, like a Thunderbird or something, a stock car or a Camaro IROC Z or something, or maybe a Dodge Daytona. If I wanted a different car body, fundamentally, I would need to buy a new car body. You could buy just the bodies for those slot cars, but the body kits alone will cost as much as a whole other Lego set that would include like a whole other car. And with a whole other car, from Lego, I would have gotten extra pieces that would allow me to then mix and match the parts so I could change the color schemes and make something even more custom. Plus, this being Lego in the first place, I could customize these by just moving the pieces around, and I could rob some of these parts, use some of those. We don't need all those slopes. I can, make them a little bit more enclosed, make them look a little bit more sleek, adjust the aerodynamics of them in my head, which would actually matter for the sake of play. This, I think, would actually win out. And that surprised me when I went through that entire thought experiment of thinking this versus a slot car set that would actually go. Now, if you were to compare this, put this up against a full function RC car, okay, something that actually had not only forward and turn and reverse, but forward, back, independent turn in forward and back, and possibly even the turbo switch on the throttle, good old Sears Super Lobo, something like that. Now, an RC, I think that would put things over the top because that's just such a special thing and it has more mechanics and it's got the springs in it and, you can take it out. I could use a shovel or trowel and make my own little course in a backyard or on an empty lot or something. But, yeah, just fun, to go back and think about that. Really think of these toys from the perspective of a kid. Now, of course, not every kid is going to be that analytical about things, but hey, this is Lego. Tends to kind of cater to the more nerdy minded in some cases. I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but I'm just saying, stuff that some of us would have thought about, and it's cool to think back to those times and considering just how simple these builds really were in those days compared to stuff nowadays. I mean, look at the part count for this compared to the size of a set that would have that part count today. There's no comparison. Yes, the base plates make a big difference, but ignore the base plates and just look at what you actually build here. It's not that complex for how big it is. And yet there was still a lot that could be done. There was still a lot that could be thought about. And the way that this is presented provides so much space for minifigs to just be placed. If you were a lucky kid and you had lots of figures, well, this comes with lots of Lego figures, but if you had even more, or if you had other figures, Green Army Man or whatever, other figures from other, your little muscle what were those called? The little gummy, flesh-colored, little wrestling weird things. Like you could put those up here, right? As kids, we didn't just always stick to Lego with Lego. Mix and match different things together. There's plenty of space. Bring in some Hot Wheels cars. They could race around this as well. Good stuff, you know? Childhood. It's cool. It was cooler back in the day, though. I'm just saying. You had to use your imagination more. Big thanks again to Tim and GK Econ. To GK Econ for providing that opportunity, to Tim for providing the support through Patreon for this sort of thing to happen in the first place. Tim for making this fantastic choice to allow me and encourage and terribly force me to get this fantastic set. I was really fortunate to be able to track one down that was truly complete, mostly original, all vintage parts, some substitutions maybe from slightly different eras, but it's pretty original with all the prints present and everything. So, I got fortunate on that, and I'm very happy to have had this experience, to go through this. Were it not for them, I would never have touched this set. It would remain as something I had only ever seen in my life in those little catalogs that I used to stare at as a kid, and I still like to stare at from time to time nowadays. Thank you very much for watching. Hope that you enjoyed this, including maybe some of the extra stuff. If you made it this far, congrats, and/or I'm sorry, and I'll talk to you again soon.